Hello, everyone. How are you doing? It is Sunday, and I'm Kristi, and that means it's time for Social Science Sunday. And today we're going to wrap up our lecture on feminist critique of Marxism, but also the contributions of Marxist critique to feminist theory and feminist practice. I wanted to say quick hi to Trans Gamer Girl in the chat. Thank you for stopping by. I'll shout out some other people as I see you. A to the K, good to see you as well. All right, so the way that we're going to proceed is that I'm going to just quickly go over what we discussed last time, and then I'm going to introduce some important philosophical concepts for this this lecture, because we're going to need these concepts in order to understand what comes after. Hold on, I'm going to move, 1 second. I thought I had my camera in a place where I liked it, but I changed my mind because I'm having a hard time seeing part of the screen now. So there we go. I'm trying not to look down at you. Yeah, that works. I think that works all right. Let's proceed. Let's get right into this. Come on, Google Slides. There we go. All right. Last time we discussed some of the differences. Yeah, but we ended, I should say. We ended with a comparison, Vergleichung, between liberal approaches to feminist critique and what Marxist offered, or what Marx and Engels offered, that was quite unique, original, and such an important theoretical contribution that, frankly, whatever your views are on Marx, you cannot you cannot exist in this space without engaging in these critiques. So we saw last time that Marxist feminist analysis differs from liberal feminist critiques in that Marx distinguishes between political and human emancipation. He looks at political emancipation, declaring that, all men, all men are equal despite real inequities in society. And therefore, formal equality for all men really only disguises true inequalities on which the state is based. Now, does this sound at all familiar or relevant to current debates about critical race theory? It should, because this is the same perspective that we see, but just applied to a different level of intersection. There is a very convincing case to be made that while important, the liberal position of legal equality and the aspiration for political equality, one person, one vote, does not necessarily guarantee those things because of inequalities in society that exist materially. Therefore, let's just take a case study that has nothing to do with gender. We can look at the case of post-Civil War America, where the white majority kind of went, okay, black people, you're now black Americans, you're free and equal, and we're done. Then, so legally there was the pretense of equality on paper. Equality existed on paper. It didn't exist in practice. And that is a thing that Marx pointed out very well. Another way that Marxist analysis differs from liberal critique, get a little cough there, is that from the Marxist perspective, true emancipation requires a transformation of society such that it is impossible for people to have material differences or needs or extremes. And then, according to this theory, once you fundamentally transform the material basis of a society, then presto changeo, any artificial distinctions between the state and society, citizens and private individuals, all disappears. We'll get onto that. Some good ideas, but also some meh, right? And this is what it's important to bring theories together in the social sciences, not look for a unifying theory of all. Marxist critique of liberalism implies women's subordination will not be ended when equal rights, regardless of your sex or gender, we would say now, is achieved. Political equality does not transfer into substantive equality, material equality. Therefore, Marxist theory sees political power as the result of economic conditions. And political power is not an independent cause of social transformation. You can have laws that change, you can have principles that you declare, you can give people rights and change the structure of voting or who counts as a legal person in your society, but that will never bring about the actual change that it seeks. Because whatever the legal fiction is, the material reality is what is most important to determining people's lives. And this is an incredibly, I mean, it's a little bit, it's a bit of a blind side. It's got blind spots to its own gaps. Oh no, I went too far. It's got some blind spots to its own theoretical gaps. Stop doing that, OBS. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. That's why. I want to make myself a little bit smaller because otherwise I get in the way of the text. And this is an incredibly powerful critique. It's also one that can then turn around and be leveled a little bit. The tunnel vision part of it can be leveled at Marxism as well. This is where we get the most interesting, unexplored parts of society because of Western philosophy's focus on white men, for lack of a better word, and sort of universal generalizations that really only apply to a certain class of people. These things being pointed out is very it's very important, and it changed the way we think about liberation and emancipation. All right, so moving on. Now, before I start the last lecture here in Feminist Political Theory by Valerie Bison, second edition, a bit out of date, but, ooh, I just got lipstick on it. The terms that we have to understand before we start this last lecture are two concepts, well, a concept from philosophy and then a concept about an ongoing debate in sociology, psychology, political science, and everything. The first one is a philosophical concept, and this is what I would call the logical fallacy of essentialism. Essentialism is this idea that things have a set of characteristics which make them what they are. And when these things come together, they form a sort of essence that has almost like an objective truth about it. The idea of essence is that there is a core of a concept that you can get to, and once you find it, it will be, clear, definable. You can put a circle around it, and also it is universal. If you find it in one person or 10 people, you're going to find it in all people or all things. It's a problem because it's a lie. That's the problem with essentialism, is that it's BS. There is no essence of tree. There is no essence of space. There is no essence of woman. And that is because the universe itself, all material phenomenon, are collections of other things. And because their existence is dependent on things that a tree's existence is entirely dependent on things that are not tree. It's dependent on carbon in the air, carbon dioxide. It's dependent on water. It's dependent on sunlight. None of those are tree. Right? Tree. None of those are tree. It is only when a certain set of physical and energy, if you want to say, things come together that we have given the label of tree to, that something is appropriately called a tree. If we have a convention that trees are things that grow in the ground and have roots and trunks and barks and do photosynthesis and, have some sort of conversion mechanism, be that needles or leaves, to turn, to engage in photosynthesis. If we have these sort of necessary and sufficient conditions, what we're really listing there is a series of non-tree things that make up tree. I think you're getting the point here. And therefore, this idea that there is something that you can identify that is woman, that only cis women possess, is a lie. It's just not true. It's based on something that sounds and feels true. Book, right? I've got book here. And there feels like there's a bookness to it. It feels like there's something about this that makes it, different from, let's say, my kitty-faced coffee coaster, right? That these two things are fundamentally different. This has a bookness to it, which makes it book, and this has coasterness, which makes it coaster. But it's an illusion. It's an illusion in the same way, in my opinion, a rainbow is illusion. an illusion. A rainbow looks like it has physical manifestation in a sky, in a certain local, like if you were asked to predict where the end of the rainbow is, you could not accurately, but based on your perception of it, estimate where you think the end of the rainbow is. But of course, the rainbow is epiphenomenal. It is merely the collection of sunlight and rain and optics, and you being in a certain position that makes it look like it appears. But you take away those conditions, and it's no longer a rainbow. If I took away all of the text in this book, it's no longer book. Right? This is coaster. If I made this too small to work as a functional coaster, it loses its essence of coaster. It loses its function, its association with coaster. And yet, what has really changed when I take ink off of this paper? Is ink book? No. So if ink isn't book, and what is book? And there is no book. There is no spoon. Okay, to quote the Matrix, there is no spoon. There's a collection of things, a non-spoon things we call spoon. I think this is my perspective. I'm not speaking like definitive truth. So if you have a different notion of how things exist, that's fine. But in terms of social constructionism, this is how my understanding of the world and how we function within it, in our flawed ways of functioning within it. Okay, so this is important. Essentialism is at the base of race. Kind of essentialism, sex essentialism, all kinds of fallacies that sound good when you first hear them, but don't hold up to deeper examination. All right, I'll just read this out. I think I've got this mostly, but if you're interested, you can there is a wiki that has a good definition. I think it's like wiki definition or something. Anyway, it says, historically, beliefs which posit that social entities such as ethnicity, nationality, or gender are essential characteristics have in many cases shown to have destructive or harmful results. It has been argued by some that essentialist thinking lies at the core of many reductive, discriminatory, or extremist ideologies. Narrator, I would be one of those people. Psychological essentialism is also correlated with race prejudice. It's easier to think that people are bad because of who they are, because of their skin color, because of their ethnic background, because of their religion, than to engage on a more complex, sophisticated level that requires more cognitive effort and a greater framework in which to, and an alternative framework in which to think about things. And let's be honest, religions in the world today do not encourage sophisticated thinking. When you live in a dualism of God good, devil bad, this kind of essentialism is very easy to slide into. All right, so the other big concept that we need to talk about today before we can move on is the debate over structure and agency. Now, the structure and agency debate will never be won because there is no answer. The structure and agency debate describes the conditions under which individuals and society exist in cooperation and in tension. Right. What is the structure-agency debate? In the social sciences, there is a standing debate over the primacy of structure or agency in shaping human behavior. Agency is the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own free choices, while structure is the recurrent patterned arrangement of society, which influences or limits the choices and opportunities available. Is it structure? Okay, when it comes to the structure or agency debate, is it structure or agency? And the answer, it's both. We all are born into social structures, economic structures, political structures beyond our control. We can't wave a magic wand and change things. Therefore, we will, and for our entire lifetimes, be under the influence of whatever economic, political structures, social organizations we find ourselves within. Within those structures, however, individuals do have degrees of agency. Not everyone will have the same amount of agency. People with money have way more agency. People in the right ethnic group have more agency. People in the dominant religion have more agency. People in other groups also have agency. However, their agency is far more limited because of the structures. So when we're looking at why societies are shaped the way they are, or who has an interest in preserving the current systems of power and ownership of wealth and status, we have to look at not only what individuals can do to change their lives, but the structures they are working against or with, depending on where they are located in terms of their intersectional identities. Right, and so as we go into this last bit, because that's actually let me just take a moment and say, this structure agency debate kind of lies at the heart of the disagreement between liberalism and Marxism. Because liberalism, as we'll see, has an explanation that's based on agency. Marxism has an explanation based in structure. And we really want to distill down the differences, right? That's fundamentally where the tensions between these two theoretical perspectives lie. And when you want to say who is right, the question is both are to some degree. And that's what makes it difficult. It's not like, I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think it's a reasonable position to say, as maybe libertarians would, everything is agency and nothing is structure. That just doesn't make any sense, because we know gendered structures, heteronormative structures, economic structures, social structure, like all kinds of things will create a world of your opportunities that you could work within. Or you have to work around because you can't work within them. And it's not all structure, because humans aren't mindless automatons that are just going to, you put in a code and they spend the rest of their lives doing that one thing because of the structures. And so this tension isn't because the people in the field don't know what they're talking about or the people in the field can't get an answer. The tension exists because the tension exists in society. And that tension is reflected in the theory. Kay, can I just check in with everyone? I know it's a case when I lecture a lot, y'all get quiet, but can I make sure, is the sound okay? Are my plosives too high? I noticed, like I said, I'm trying to speak a little bit farther away from the mic to avoid that kind of sound. And so, before we move on to the lecture proper, someone on the keyboard just, because I can't see if my stream is still going. So is the stream still going? Yeah, it looks to be going. All right. I just can't see anyone in the chat. That's all right. All right, on the assumption that we're still going and everything is fine, I'm going to go ahead and continue on with this next bit. Oh, do I have another slide? Actually, apparently I do. I have one more thing to say about structure and agency. Let's see if I've already anticipated myself. Slideshow? Slideshow. Where does slideshow go? There it is. I hate how, like the slideshow button is one place on Word and one place. Thank you, Aid to Decay. One place on a different one, and I always fumble. Anyway. Right. Let us go on with this last thing. The structure versus agency debate may be understood as an issue of socialization against autonomy. Okay, this is a more academic-y way. Thank you, Michael Mistaken. I appreciate you leaning forward or taking the time to drop that in. This is, I think, more academic-y way of saying what I just said. It took me 5 minutes. So the structure versus agency debate may be understood as an issue of socialization against autonomy in determining whether an individual acts as a free agent or in a manner dictated by social structure. And as I said, it's not or, it's and. People work to some degree as free agents, and also they operate within dictated social structures. That's my take. If you have a different take, hey, that's cool. Maybe we can talk sometime. Right. With that framework, it might be a bit more comprehensive now when we look, I hope it's more comprehensive, when we look at the debates between liberal and Marxist feminism. They have very different outlooks on human nature. The liberal take is the fundamental and core grounding of liberalism, if you want to distill it down into a single grain, is that men, by that I mean that's like a grammatical error. For men, the basis of their human rights is their rationality. Now let's think a little bit about who came up with this idea. We are talking about, at least if we're working within the framework of Western societies, because this roadmap doesn't work as well. The liberalism debate only kind of works in societies where liberalism was a philosophical school. If we look at the class that it came out of and who was writing about it, and also what the ideas were at the time, we can understand the path dependency, as it were, of how we ended up with liberalism. We start with, we don't start with Locke, but we start with Bacon and the development of the scientific method. We have the Enlightenment, where there is an exposure to quite a lot of ancient philosophy that wrestled with fundamental core issues of how things exist and whatnot and why. One of the things that is at the core of this is this idea of human rationality, the production of knowledge, whereas before the church and innate parts of yourself that God had written things on was a source of knowledge. That was thrown out in favor of the tabula rasa, the idea that our physical experiences are the source of most of our knowledge, and that it is our ability to think through things, predict things, understand things, reverse engineer things. All of this is, is built on a function of our brains called rationality that is unique to the human creature. And this uniqueness of this rationality is what separates us from other animals. And it allows us to form complicated societies and to have consciousness. And so, all these really rich, well-educated white men who had servants, who had put a lot of value in intellect and learning and knowledge according to a rigorous standard, who were changing the ideas of what constituted knowledge and how knowledge could be tested, it makes sense that they would put as their priority mind stuff, brain stuff. Okay, so rationality, so can I just pause here? A to the K. Rationality here doesn't mean making a good decision. Being rational in sort of like, if you offer me $1 for work versus $100 for work and I take the $1, I made a bad decision. It's more like, well, if you reach that $1 thing, there was a series of decisions that you made to get there. And those series of decisions were rational to you, presumably. And so it's more the ability to reason rather than reasoning correctly. A lot of people reason incorrectly. They're still rational, if that makes sense. You can distinguish between the typical uses of rational and the theoretical application of rationality in this very narrow way to talk about cognitive processes rather than evaluate an outcome. And they've got a point. Like, I just want to say, I'm not going to come down. I'm thinking here, like, I think both sides have a point, and I don't think you have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You just have to exist with these two tensions. And it is true that this is a defining characteristic of human beings. We do have these kinds of skills, cognitive skills, that just really set us apart. But the Marxist take, instead, would say, well, no. The defining characteristic of men, sick, again, like wrong, is that humans organize and plan purposeful production activities. Human beings don't hunt in order to survive or find shelter in order to stay out of the wind. Okay, no worries, A to decay. Actually, I'm glad you asked that question because it's always good to repeat that. So thank you for that opportunity to expand on a very core difference between rationality that exists in theory and rationality that exists in the everyday speak. So so human beings don't just hunt, find enough food to survive and find enough shelter to keep out of the storm. We produce things. We create things. We have ideas for new things. And this creative, productive capacity of generating or transforming the world, shaping it based on our ideas and the things that happen in our head combined with our labor, that's what makes human beings so different. That's the thing Marx points to, is this productivity, this physicality, as it were. It is the material transformation with a material body of our material world. And therefore, Marx also rejects this sort of idea of a rational human essence that was quite early on, I think, more popular in the rationalist sort of side of things. Instead, Marx saw man, again, as the product of society, whereas human essence, he thought, it's not an abstraction inherent in each individual. Human essence isn't this sort of like, oh yeah, there's a humanness or a manness that exists like in a sort of platonic ideal form that manifests. And none of that is the case. The reality is that human essence is the ensemble of the social relations. Maybe a good way, we get back to the rainbow analogy again here. the essence of humanism, or not humanism, but the essence of human, if Marx was going to, I think, offer one, would be this combination of your economic situation, your production, all these other things, when brought together, give you this, you could say, like, a human essence, but it's not really an essence. It's what makes you distinct. Therefore, according to Marxist theory, man's productive activity creates his society. That humans are self-creators, and that is what is really unique about them. And this idea of conscious creativity is an alternative to liberal perspectives, which elevates mental activities above physical activities, which really also kind of, you can see that in terms of the way that Marx puts a lot of emphasis on work and what you spend your time doing and what you create out of it, because he is looking at physical production rather than intellectual activity or intellectual production. Let's see. And this notion between mental activity, this perceived separation between mental activities and physical activities, Marx predicted, was an artificial separation that would be overcome in future communist societies. All right. With that background, we're now going to get on to unpacking this a bit more and wrapping up the chapter on the contribution of Marx and Engels to feminism. All right. Hold on one quick second. I'm going to adjust where my mic is because it's in the way of my text. All right, I think that's better. It's easier for me to see now. Okay, going right from the slides. In theory, the Marxist view should hold. So if we're looking, so we're going to do some evaluation of Marx right now. According to Marxist theory, if we look at the value of work and productivity and this idea that physical production is actually the thing that makes humans very different, it should say that reproductive and domestic work is equal to, not inherently inferior to, men's intellectual activities under liberalism, right? There should be this radical, because everyone who works. Therefore, there should be no difference between the kind of work you do. The fact that you're doing work is the thing that is important. But we see that despite this, like understanding, like in here understanding, like, oh yeah, work is what really counts. Marx and Engels are products of their time, and they devalue reproductive and domestic labor. Bryson writes, this was because of the way it was organized as a personal service, not because of its essential attributes. And I think Bryson is being, my take is, I think Bryson is being quite generous here. Because I think that, you want to say that the way that that domestic and reproductive work was organized as a personal service, lots of work was organized as a personal service, but this class of work is degraded or is ranked as less important or devalued. That's the word I'm looking for, because of who does the work. That's what it comes down to. Who does the work determines the value of it. When rich, privileged men do the work, then, oh my gosh, of course, he deserves a $4 billion bonus in stock dividends and share whatever and payouts because he led the company to a massive profit. Well, that's on the back of cleaners and everyone else along the side. So it's not just about being of personal service. There's a core sexism that underpins it. There is an assumption about women's like reproductive work being not quite as important as the real work, which is done in the factories and in the companies and in the outside world. It's a public-private distinction. Cleaning an office is more valuable than cleaning a house. And that's because the person, it's being done by a certain, it's disproportionately done by a certain gender, and it's done in the private sphere. So, let's see. However, what I think maybe Bryson is trying to get at is that Marx doesn't inherently dismiss domestic or reproductive work because it is done by a certain group. It's just that he didn't really do too much about it, but Engels just couldn't get back beyond the sexism of their own day. It also seems to be that labor is owed to the husband and child rather than as an economic contribution. Correct. I think that's also another way, a really, really good way to look at it, Age of Decay, is that perhaps a fundamental reason why Marx and Engels didn't see it as important is because it wasn't monetarily compensated. And it was not seen as, you were obliged to care for. I mean, of course, if you're having kids, you're obligated to take care of them, but that doesn't mean it's not work. And yes, I think that there is a self-negation expectation in the reproductive, for sure, side of things, and I think it's changing more with domestic labor. But when it comes to reproduction, there's a lot of say burden put on those people to say, well, you chose to get pregnant, so you're just going to have to do this work now. That's your choice. You're working for free. As opposed to saying, wow, it's really important that we value your contributions because you're shaping the future generations of society and workers and parents and voters. So maybe we should really invest in this. But so this is just to say, Marxism does not necessitate sexism. It just reproduced the sexism of its own day. Hey, Kev, good to see ya. Good to see you in the chat. I'm going to take a quick sip here, and then we're going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so for Marxist, sex equality cannot be understood in terms of abstract principles, only in terms of their historical context. And therefore, if you understand the way that this is located in a historical context, then the opposition to women's emancipation from a Marxist perspective is not simply from maybe, say, a liberal notion of injustice. This women's reproductive and productive emancipation reflects a material interest, and it reflects the structured economic needs of a society. And let's talk about the role of patriarchy in this. Let's get some feminist critique in here. If you have societies that have been historically patriarchal, which have viewed children as the properties of the father, which expects, I want to say billions of dollars, but an enormous amount of free labor in order to exist and thrive, it has that expectations, then the material conditions of that society will limit people. It will shunt them into certain classes, certain jobs, certain social positions that all of the liberalism of the world won't solve. Okay? Okay, but I'm going to say, on the other hand, there's no guarantee that just changing material conditions will stop people from being sexist or racist or bigoted. So, this is like Marxism isn't sufficient. For Marxist, sex equality cannot be... Oh, I did this one already. Did I do it twice? Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay. I had copied this slide a couple times because it was like 6 points long. Therefore, the struggle for sex, and I want to put in here gender equality, is integrally connected to economic class struggle. And I think that is true. We know that you're not truly free if you can't live, if you don't have water, food, a place to live, some amount of security. And that if equality is to be achieved, again, I'm using very much this binary language from Bryson's note and trying to update it to be inclusive, to kind of show the evolution even in feminist thought. So if individuals are to become equal without regard to gender, then it is vital that they achieve full economic independence. You can't be free if you're dependent on somebody else for your economic conditions or satisfying your economic needs. And this, in turn, relies on the collectivization of housework and childcare, which they are right. I mean, we saw Engels had a proposal that the way to take more of the burden from women who are in the home in his time period was that women should get together and collectivize childcare and domestic work rather than saying, hey, maybe men should step up and do some of this. Like that didn't, like that option, like men doing collectivizing work and putting it out to men, didn't kind of like exist within this framework, but it would today. It's important to realize that Marxism does not allow for the possibility of oppression without an economic foundation. And because of its focus on economic determinism, the way that our material conditions will shape, limit, or free us to behave in certain ways, its laser-like focus on this problem means that it really has a blind spot theoretically to non-economic sources of conflict or oppression. The idea that patriarchy can't exist in a classless society is just sus. Right? So the great thing about, so on the plus minus here, the great thing about Marxism is that it really highlights and shows the causal relationship of material and economic structures that liberalism alone cannot address. That you can't just pass laws and people will become equal. You really have to think materially about who owns the wealth, who does the work, how that work is valued, how that work is distributed, who benefits from it, and how to kind of like, spread that out in a society so that one group isn't overly burdened relative to the rest. But this specialization, shall we say, in a deep understanding of material and economic structures kind of gets a blinders on. If you think that, and we've seen the mentality, the reductionist mentality, once the revolution comes, we won't have a problem with patriarchy, we won't have a problem with racism, we won't have these problems. And therefore, Marx is not sufficient as a theory to account for all of the things that go into a society. So this kind of gets me back to the whole, is it better to have a wider Marxist theory that tries to encapsulate everything? No. Why would you want that? That's not scientific. And this is, again, from the perspective of, as a social scientist, it's not my job to find the one unifying theory of everything in the universe. People are complicated. Social societies are complicated. And the trick is to see the things that you don't see that influence society. It's when you have that aha moment of, like those magic eye things where you're looking at one kind of picture of just colors and squiggly lines, and then you cross your eyes a bit, and suddenly a tiger face pops out of it, right? It was there the whole time. The tiger face was always there. The problem was you weren't looking at it in the right way to see it. And that's why we need competing theories of human behavior and human psychology in the social sciences, because things are there, and until someone goes, hey, have you ever noticed material conditions tend to really determine people's outcome in life? Until someone has that moment of clarity, until Darwin says, hey, evolution is variation in reproduction over natural selection forces over time. And you're like, you know what, that's right. It's kind of like, for me, here's a really, I'm going to date myself here, but it's like when I look back at the 1980s and I look at a Queen concert and Freddie Mercury, and I look at that now, and then I remember that when Freddie Mercury came out as gay, people were shocked. Some people were shocked. Not all people were shocked. Some people don't know that for a long time, right? But for a lot of just mainstream people, they didn't see it because we didn't have the kind of representation, and we didn't have. It's not a perfect society now, but I think people who are gay, lesbian, trans, intersexed, asexual, queer, there is more safety in coming out and being yourself. But imagine, it's hard for me to imagine looking at Freddie Mercury and going, oh yeah, he's straight, totally straight. I'm sure nothing, that's 100% hetero. And now I look back and so of course not. But until our frameworks change, we don't see what's right in front of us. And that's why I like the multiplicity of theories in the social sciences, each one adds their own perspective. And it is a little bit, I think, by adding a series of pure, less accurate perspectives that we end up with something closer to the truth. So to wrap this up, modern feminists who wish to use Marxist theory in a less reductionist way are kind of left with this problem of how to understand the intersection of class and sex, which again, class and gender, I would add, as well as patriarchy and capitalism. And this gap generated a lot of debate in the coming decades. The coming, this was what, 1880s to, no, that's mainstream feminism. Marx was writing, in the late 19th century. And there's been a lot of work done on Marxist feminism and critiques of Marxism by feminists since then. All right, we're going to kind of wrap this up a little bit early. I was focused on the lecture slides, and as a consequence, I didn't dally too much. If you have questions or comments, this would be a good time to start writing them. If you have thoughts on agency or structure, if you have some other stuff, some other takes, because while you're typing that, I'll give you a couple of minutes. I am going to talk a little bit about moving forward. I'm so tempted. I mean, I don't want to overcommit myself, but honestly, I don't know about you all. I had a really fun time going through this chapter. I learned a lot. A lot of it was also reminding me things of what I knew in the past but had forgotten, or taking a kernel of something I understood and expanding it and putting it into a lot more context. So I really did enjoy this quite a lot. And I'm just kind of wondering, if there is some interest. Perhaps what I could do is kind of look at doing some more on feminism and feminist theory based on, maybe I'll get the third edition of this book and kind of continue forward, because I feel like there is a real dearth of honest, fair, critical, presentations of feminist theory online. And this isn't the most exciting way to present it. I'm probably better off doing some sort of cartoons in a Prager-style video. But at the end of the day, this is just it's kind of some heavy stuff that you need to think about. And so I might just stick that out. But honestly, I've had a lot of fun. Yeah, so A to the K, you enjoyed them too. Good. It's sad how happy and excited I get to think about these kinds of things. And I was like, oh yeah, we get to discuss essentialism in today's lectures. I should do a whole bit on essentialism so they really understand what is at the core of this and that kind of stuff. Hey, PZ in the chat. Children are evil, but grandchildren are much better. Yes, they're more fun, aren't they? And easier. All right, no questions. Okay, then for those of you who are interested, or I'll show all under the thing now. I will be reworking, because work smarter, not harder. And when it comes to philosophy, happily, it doesn't change too much year on year. It's not like tech. Aristotle is Aristotle is Aristotle. Not a whole lot has changed. Academia.edu. I'm going to go, I'll show you where you can find all of my, let's see, what's the best way to do this? My profile, reading account setting, uploads? Yeah, let's try uploads. I'll show you where you can find the lecture notes for the, no, that's not what I wanted. How about analytics? Will analytics give me a hyperlink to my posted content? Let's see. A learning and teaching researcher read your paper, Reliability and Validity in Qualitative Research. Cool. Let's see here. Ordinary, qualitative. Yeah, okay. We're getting close. Can we get to... I'll try to get you... I should have done this earlier. Qualitative research methods. All right, we're getting pretty close. Actually, we want the quants one. I think we're doing quants. So let me see if I can find a quants paper. I have all of my lectures already up online. If anything, I'm going to be importing them and changing their backgrounds from white to black. But other than that, I think I'm pretty much going to keep... I get a lot of hits on my ordinary least squares regression. Yeah, I get a lot of problems of heteroskedasticity and violations of the model when it comes to regression. in a year, you're going to know what that means. Okay, we're going to start with the quantitative research methods. I will also discuss qualitative research methods because the way that I look at it is that science is, okay, we have knowledge production, and my perspective is I tend to call quants-based scientific, and I talk about qual as studies, because I think for my money, falsification is the way that is the primary distinction upon which like science and non-science rests, and that qual can be not science and be completely valid as knowledge generation. You can study something and not be able to make scientific claims about it, but you can still make knowledge claims about it. So no, I don't want the recent papers. I want my qualitative research methods. Where's my freaking, you suck, stupid academia.edu. How about if I go, all right, let me go into my profile. See if I can get, let's see, what do people have to say in the chat? Not much. Oh, okay. Qualitative research, quantitative research. Yes, this is the one. I will put this into the chat. I will also put this up in the lectures upcoming so that y'all can make sure if you want to pre-read the lectures, you absolutely can. If you want to just wait and for the class, you can do that too. But we've got 2 parts, and it might even go a little bit farther because I don't know if I can get through all of this in a live session the way I could in a classroom, but because I tend to chat a bit more here and make it I'm trying to be a bit slower. But everything we're going to learn is already here. When it comes to some of these, I'm not going to be doing as much. I'm going to give illustrations of the quantitative stuff so that you can understand. Here's my goal. All right, let me talk about what my goal is for this next section, which is when you read a crosstab in a newspaper, I want you to be able to feel very confident that you understand how to interpret it. When you come across some academic paper that a person is citing, let's say, someone on the right wing posts up some paper, eventually you're going to get to a point where you see a table with a bunch of numbers next to it and asterisks and things like p-values and positive and negative coefficients. I want to be able to have the confidence, even if you don't understand all of the logic underneath it. You don't understand how the car runs, you can still drive the car. So I want you to be able to look at that study and go, well, yeah, this particular measure on gender, let's say, is statistically significant, but it's only statistically significant at the 0.05, and it's only 0.5, we have like 5.4 or something like that, so it's barely statistically significant. And if we raise the threshold to 0.01 in order to evaluate the performance of the model components, well, then we're going to have to throw that one out because it really doesn't make the cut. And to know what all of that means. So there's no complicated maths involved. I teach stats in the lecture side like a language, and then I would focus on making sure people in my classes understood how to apply that logic in a software program, because a software program does the formulas for you. If you're doing a master's class and you only do like one course, you don't, like, knowing the formulas and having them memorized won't help you in the real world. What will be is understanding the logic of it and how you get to that in a software program. We can't do the software program here, so we're going to be focusing mostly on logic. And we're going to start, with philosophy of social science, parts 1, 2, maybe 3 and 4. And then we're going to get right into the fact there's an area where it's not clear, like it can be quants or qual. And textual analysis and understanding like content analysis, you could do discourse analysis from a qualitative point of view, or you can look at content analysis in terms of how the media frames politics, how many times they use a negative framing for a politician in a headline. So we're going to go from kind of like, here are all the ways in which qual and quants are similar philosophically in terms of their goals, even in terms of some of the things that they look at. And then we're going to get increasingly into more and more quantsy kind of things. All right, so what is A to the K says? So developing some information literacy in allowing us to understand what those complicated seeming graphs actually say and if it makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I don't understand everything about Bayesian analysis, but when I read a table that deals with Bayesian analysis, I know that statistical significance pretty much, will carry over the basic premises, carry over, model fit carries over. And so, I might not be on a level to engage with a deep critique of Bayesian analysis, but when someone presents me the results, I can understand how they reached that conclusion. And then if I wanted to go deeper into it about some of the ways that they fitted, like different variables or yada, 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 then we can do that. But that basic literacy in interpretation, I call it the 4 S's: size, sign, strength. Size is the size of the beta. Sign is positive or negative. Strength of the model, and something else with an S that I can't remember, but it's in my notes. Significance. Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah. Size, sign, strength, and significance. So the size of the coefficient, the beta coefficient in the case of regression or LS regression, to see what variable is contributing the most. The sign, is it positive or negative? Does it increase or decrease the effect that we're interested in studying? Strength of the model. Does the model, the theoretical variables together, explain a lot of variations between people or not? And then what significance? Which ones are making the contribution to that model strength, and which ones are really just control variables that we're making sure we're not getting a spurious correlation? And if none of that made sense now, in about 10 weeks it will. So, all right. I feel a little bit odd ending early, but people here seem to be more absorbing information than writing in the chat, so I feel like I've done my job and come on and delivered dropped some knowledge, as it were. If you want, again, the book that we've been... Can I go full screen? Can I go full screen to camera? Yeah. Oh, you can see my D&D books in the back. Oh, that's embarrassing. You could only see from here up before, and now you can see my geeky D&D books in the back. But if you are interested in continuing with this book without me, you can go ahead and look for it online. Again, it is Bryson, and there is a feminist political theory version, 3rd edition, which I would suggest because the 1990s was a long time ago to be writing about feminist theory. Language has moved on. The gender binary has really been left behind. Intersectionality has risen. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of nods to intersectionalism in this book, but I think the 3rd edition would probably have even more. All right, y'all. That was your nerdy hour for this week. I think I'm going to wrap it up. So until next time, y'all. I've been Kristi. You've been awesome. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you, PZ, for stopping by. Thank you to Kevin. And please go and check out Kevin's Twitch channel. He's back on Twitch. Although, I don't know if you're still around, Kevin, if you are in the chat. But that live stream on Friday got like over 600 views since we did it live. And I'm just kind of wondering, I don't know what view count you get on Twitch after the live stream, but I thought like it was getting close to 700 views. That was quite a lot. So yeah, we should definitely have a weekly sort of Twitch thing where we get Too Hot for Twitch, where we come over to YouTube, because yeah, it's my home anyway. I like it here. All right. Thank you all too. Thank you. Thank you for thanking me. Thank you for showing up and giving me your time and attention. And all that's left to be said is that I have been Kristi. You have been awesome. Have a wonderful Sunday. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe wherever it is and whenever it is you are. Okay, bye.